Hello, and you're listening to Walk the Talk with Kim. I'm Kim Ariano, and we're being preempted today, so we're just going to really jump right into talking with our guests today. I'm here with Eric, of course, our producer. How are you doing today, Eric?
Good afternoon, Kim. I'm doing great.
Gorgeous outside,
Beautiful.
man. Oh, I love this time of year when it's nice like this. And we also have with us Jerry Pearson and his beautiful wife, Michele. And we're going to be talking with them about their organization that is focused on providing legal services to veterans and their families. So, again, I am Kim Ariano. This is the Walk the Talk with Kim show. We focus on nonprofit and community-based organizations in an effort to get the best practices out there and also let our listeners know there are little things that you can do every day to help our communities and our organizations out there. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome Jerry and Michele.
Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome.
Thank
nice to have you. So why don't we just jump right in? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your new organization that you're starting?
My wife's pointing at me.
Yeah, I think you're speaking today. Yeah. You don't have a choice in the matter.
Okay.
So you're both lawyers,
yes.
and through
yes. Recovering attorneys, though.
Recovering attorneys.
Recovering lawyers. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
So your organization, you also are a veteran.
Yes, I am.
Ex-Marine.
Yes.
And
yes.
Through the law firm or the law organization, you decided that there was something that veterans needed. What was that?
Well, we kept running into problems where people, not just veterans, but families and people who didn't really know where to get resources, and sometimes they didn't really know what the questions were to ask. They just felt very confused, and sometimes we're in a lot of turmoil. We see this with clients frequently. But when I started being more connected to the veterans community at the VA Center in Seattle and started talking to the head of the PTSD section and some of the other providers, it became clear that there was really an acute need with regard to veterans and their families. And then that started us looking at how much businesses, professional practices, really, they develop a lot of specialized information. But frequently they retain that information just for their clients or just for their customers in some kinds of business environments. What we wanted to do is make that information available to people. So kind of share the expertise. The idea would be that people that have certain kinds of expertise, whether they're doctors or lawyers or accountants or counselors in many settings, they can really make a difference. And they can make a difference quickly, especially if you consult them early, as opposed to wait until something has devolved into a much larger crisis. So that was the start of it. Personally, I was inspired to find out that even though there's a lot of perspectives on kind of polarity in many issues in this country, this seemed to be an issue upon which there was enormous consensus and enormous agreement across all sorts of boundaries. And colleagues that we talked to were really inspired by the opportunity to help. And a lot of things that go on professionally, like in the Bar Association, they do occur locally, but you have to know where they are, you have to walk in. And it just seemed to us that the technology was available to try to connect people quickly, give them information through a website entity. So that was kind of the origin of the idea of establishing a nonprofit organization, having an advisory board of directors that was from veterans and their families, and really putting the network together. And so that's what we've launched, and we're already seeing some results, but it's definitely something we expect will gain momentum.
Right, exactly. So what are some of the types of services that you feel that veterans need out there that they're not getting that they can get through your organization?
That's a really good question, and frankly, we were ill-equipped to really answer that question. So what we did is Michele and I designed a survey, and we took it to groups of providers who actually work with veterans and their families. Our concern is that we have a limited perspective from the legal perspective, and we don't get involved in criminal cases. So we knew that there were a lot of issues, whether they were just anger issues, frustration issues, criminal issues of different kind, but we didn't know what else veterans needed themselves. So we took the survey, designed the survey with the help of some colleagues, and then we went and gave it to providers, and we then took their information and really used that as the groundwork and the structure for the site. And what they told us was that they not only hear from veterans, but many, many times veterans are kind of shut down and disconnected, or really sort of in a lot of emotional turmoil, and they don't communicate well. But sometimes their spouse will, or their children will, or people that know the family will. So they identified probably half a dozen key areas, family law areas, having to do with custody, visitation, child support, things like that, many of which depend on principled communication, and that's one of the first things that drops out when people really get under it.
What does that mean?
It's like they need to be able to pick up the phone and talk to each other. They frequently, at least in our experience, frequently many veterans, it becomes so adversarial that they sort of shut down. The idea that there's a middle ground, the idea that there's a resolution available, the idea that the interests of the children and the consequences of the battle between parents can be really, really severe and long-lasting. That idea, in the short term, was really not very well understood. So family law was a big deal. Not just lawyers, but mediators, people that deal with family issues, family resolution issues, family, like I said, custody, things like that. And not necessarily in this order of priority, but one of the other major ones was mental health. One of the things that people don't know or don't understand, I did not understand it until I started connecting with the VA Center about a couple years ago when I started my health care there. I didn't understand that the VA itself can provide services to veterans, but not to family members. I didn't really understand that. They don't have the jurisdiction. They don't have the authority, the budget, the resources, etc. So frequently, if you can find supportive social services for family members, they're the ones that really are in great need. And sometimes they've got a more objective perspective, more detailed information, and those are the people who can listen and kind of collaborate within the family itself. So social service needs, things like that.
And are you thinking from the perspective of supporting a returning veteran to kind of assimilate back in, or dealing with their issues, or is it actually services for them specifically?
I think it's not so much the services directly for the veterans, although sometimes there are services they need that are not offered through the Veterans Administration, or they're living in an area that is so remote that there's not immediate services available for them, and that happens a lot. That happens a lot. Many veterans are out in, let's say the Okanagan area, or in communities in eastern Washington where they don't really have access to VA services, and sometimes the VA services are so overwhelmed or limited in those regards that they really do need outside connections. But the bigger issue for us as we learned about this was that there really are different needs. Sometimes you have family needs while a veteran is away. And sometimes just the leaving creates the crisis, just the separation, especially if there's a lot of stretch and strain domestically, and now a person is converted into a single parent who's also in a position where they're, they no longer have the other partner with them. Parental issues are very different, etc. So that was one of the major topics that came up, is consistently, how do you identify the veteran's needs? That's why we went to the providers.
Right.
Because they're the people really on the front line that identify these needs very, very keenly. And they're pretty broad. They get into other legal issues as well.